Welcome everyone to the SPORE Iceberg Explained Part 2. I'm well aware that a lot of you have been waiting for this, so I'm glad to finally get it out to y'all. If you haven't seen Part 1, I highly recommend that you watch the first because in this video we won't just be going over new content, we're also going to go over some topics from Part 1 that you guys filled in some blanks for. Before we get into the actual video, I will ask that you watch the entire video until the end as there will be some important info regarding content on this channel at the very end. And while you're at it, why don't you click that subscribe button down there if you haven't. It's the only way you'll be considered the coolest guy in school. But enough of that, how about we just get into it? This is the SPORE Iceberg Explained Part 2. Since I went more into detail in Part 1, I'll keep the explanation for iceberg images short this time around. Essentially, an iceberg image is a list of facts regarding a specific concept or piece of media with the more well-known stuff up top near the surface, and more obscure and sometimes disturbing facts towards the bottom. The topic at hand today is the 2008 evolution simulation game SPORE by Maxis and EA. The game has the player control and evolve their own species from humble single-celled beginnings to intergalactic conquest. As you can imagine with such a concept, there's a lot of interesting things to explore and theorize. In the last video, I compiled topics from 3 other SPORE icebergs into my own, and tried my best to explain everything in depth. However, you all made it clear that there was a lot more to cover in the comments after I made a call for some new content and corrections. Even though this video is the SPORE Iceberg Part 2, I figured I could mix up the format to make this sequel a little more interesting. Since the video is related to icebergs and is basically one big video split in two, why don't we investigate the two halves of the sunken SPORE Titanic? As you can see by the amazing infographic on screen, the first half will cover the corrections made for the entries in the last part, while the second half will be brand new entries. Each half will also be divided into 3 tiers we'll call classes. I will also be including the comments that gave each topic on screen to give proper credit. Now that I'm done rambling, let's get into the corrections half of the SPORE Iceberg. Let's start with our first handful of simple corrections. Pause boosting. This is the topic I got the most amount of comments about, but it's pretty warranted considering it's the only thing in the original video that I couldn't figure out. Since so many people left explanations, I can only make it fair by including the first comment to explain the concept, as well as the first comment that left directions on how to perform pause boosting. And those two are Mr. Potato and Father Kuro. All you need to do is select a target in either the creature stage or a galactic adventure while controlling a creature that has wings. You will then need to hit the pause button, which by default should be the tilde key. Then jump twice while holding the direction you'd like to fling towards, and then simply unpause. I was also directed to this very intriguing video by the user OddEnoughToby of a video by creator SavageBird Gaming using the technique to try to land on another planet in the creature stage. I don't want to spoil what happens, so I recommend watching the video yourself. Bean. Once again we were talking about our favorite homunculus Bean. Users Dead Channel and Killcore pointed out the interesting fact that Bean is statistically the worst thing in the universe. He literally has nothing going for him in the stat department with his small size, lack of arms, and his beginning of the creature stage legs, eyes, and mouth. All of this comes together on his little bean body to create a pathetic little creature, but despite all of that, we still love him. Cell Possession. I'm basically just including this entry because I found it personally interesting, even if it turns this correction to more of a biology lecture. Long-named user Mighty Tidy Whitey and I'm Smuggling Plums mentioned that this specific cell stage glitch where your player-controlled cell can hijack an enemy cell coincidentally has some basis in real-world evolutional theory. To give context, in the real world we have 2 different groups of cells. Simple prokaryotic cells, and the more complex eukaryotic cells that contain stuff like organelles and nuclei that can be found in creatures like you, the viewer. The endosymbiotic theory is the idea that the more complicated eukaryotic cells originated from larger prokaryotic cells ingesting smaller ones. These smaller cells are what is theorized to have been what is now mitochondria and chloroplasts in the cells of eukaryotic cells. In the context of the SPORE glitch, your smaller player-controlled cell would be equivalent to the smaller cells that become the mitochondria within the larger, more complicated cell that ingests you. While in reality this is just one huge coincidence, I thought the connection with the endosymbiotic theory found in the comment was kinda interesting. Maxis Cactus. For our last entry of this tier, I just wanted to make a small correction as well as make another request towards the audience. User Big Mac corrected me in regards to referring to Maxis developer Maxis Cactus as he, when she's apparently a woman according to their comment. Once again, not exactly related to the spore itself, but I figured to mention it briefly. In their comment, Big Mac also referenced an online photo album that consists of pictures of the Max's offices from back then. After looking into it, you can indeed get a glimpse of the offices back in the mid-2000s on this page on the site Flickr. It's not much, but it's kinda cool being able to see the developers and their work environment from way back then, so I recommend taking a look for yourself. On the second class, things should get more interesting from here. Dr. Pepper parts. Let's begin this tier with 4 corrections for the Dr. Pepper tie-in creature parts, with most regarding how they obtain them. But first, a little fun fact about the parts themselves. User Omekun8 claims that since the Dr. Pepper melts had no singing ability, the game would just crash if you were to socialize with creatures. I'm assuming the developers just didn't catch the oversight considering every other mouth in the game has at least 1 point towards singing. Another commenter named Aiko claimed that they got the robotic parts by contacting EA customer support. However, EA has apparently dropped support for the game back in 2019, so I doubt it can still be done today. Luckily, the third correction from Literal Trash has a way to acquire the Dr. Pepper parts today, years after their promotion ended. Their comment not only gives directions on how to obtain the parts in the present, but also some insight on how SPORE players used to get them in the past. Apparently there was once a universal key that could unlock the parts on the official SPORE forums, but unfortunately most of the information on the SPORE is lost due to its closure in 2019. Luckily, it seems as if the parts can simply be obtained through downloading the patch secondhand online and copying the file into SPORE's data folder. Dark Injection. SPORE Dark Injection is a community-made mod that is meant to implement aspects from SPORE's spiritual successor, Dark Spore. As of the writing of this script, the last update to the mod was in January of 2019, and the user, The Clever Gamer, decided to shed a little light on why that might be. It seems the main developer of Dark Injection is also the developer of the most popular SPORE mod management application. It is more than likely that they are focusing most of their time on improving and updating that instead of working on Dark Injection. Which kinda makes sense. I imagine there's probably more demand for that over Dark Injection, but I hope they eventually come back to DI if that's their passion project or something like that. Aquatic Stage. Speaking of mods, there is a mod that aims to recreate the unused aquatic stage through a modded galactic adventure level. It is created by Dark Edge TV, and you can find a trailer as well as a playthrough of the mod on their YouTube channel if you're interested. Since it is simply a modded adventure, you can't actually make your own creature for this, and players sometimes have issues installing the mod. But I think you should definitely check it out as well as Dark Edge TV's other content. Thanks to Lazino Boy for suggesting this entry. This will be our final stop on the correction side of the SPORE Titanic. I tried my best to save the most intriguing entries for last. Man-Faced Dog. One of the most iconic SPORE cryptids is the Man-Faced Dog. It is a horrific creature that was popular among the SPORE community that I had thought was lost to time. But according to the commenter Death by Proxy, it was allegedly created by the user Cantaloupe Fish, and it looks like this. The description states, an emaciated cur with the face of a man. This poor creature's forlorn expression never changes. Once a neglected sideshow attraction at a now abandoned circus, he wanders the streets of Ghost Town for reasons unknown. Entry for the Ghost Town 2010 contest. That unique description has 2 notable facts tied to it. Firstly, the Ghost Town 2010 contest, from what I can gather, was a creator contest on the SPOREs that became lost with the rest of the content on that site. Second, there may be some real-world inspiration behind the Man-Faced Dog's creation. The Jinmenken, which literally translates to human-faced dog, is a Japanese urban legend. It is said to be a creature that stalks urban areas at the dead of night. Sounds a lot like our favorite SPORE mutant, huh? This was brought to my attention by 2 commenters, one named Otaku United Studio, and another named Crim Zen. Grox, Steve, and Humanity. So this correction is actually 3 different entries from the last video, but I figured I'd stuff them all in one big segment since they're all related. Users Christoph Volant and Boy brought to my attention that there are some theories online about the origin of the Grox, the extremely aggressive space empire near the center of the galaxy. While not set in the game, some players have theorized that the Grox are either evolved humans or the creation of humans. I couldn't find anything that could explicitly explain the origin of the Grox, but the main pieces of evidence we have for the fan theory is the Earth's low T-score, the peace treaty featured on the Dance with the Devil badge, the technology and appearance of the Grox themselves, the age of their empire, and their apparent knowledge of human culture. The state of the Earth that we find in SPORE is at T-score 1, specifically due to having a very high atmosphere. This was most likely put in by Maxis to refer to the increasing amount of greenhouse gases in real-world Earth's atmosphere. The Earth we see in SPORE is meant to be a grim reminder of what could happen to our Earth in real life. It can be assumed that the reason we don't find any humans on SPORE's Earth is that the Earthlings that managed to survive the extreme climate change had abandoned the planet long ago. We'll come back to this point in a bit, so for now we'll take a closer look at the Dance with the Devil badge. I briefly mentioned it in the last video, but parts of the document featured on the badge have characters that are very similar to the Latin alphabet, a human language. All other in-universe text is in a language specifically made for the game. The text on the badge is so similar to the Latin alphabet that the scribbles on the bottom right are said to look like the word good. And then we have how the Groks look. Physiologically speaking, the Groks are very humanoid despite their technological attachments. They have 2 eyes, arms, and legs, and look mammalian in nature much like us. It's also notable how early we can encounter the Groks in a playthrough of SPORE. As early as the creature stage, sometimes a Grok spaceship can be encountered either abducting creatures or crash into the surface of the player's planet. Be aware that this is millions of years before your own creatures can become spacefaring themselves, so we never actually see what these ancient Groks look like. And finally, before we tie this all together, besides being an explicit reference to the Borg from the human-made television series Star Trek, the Groks reference stuff like CDs, hoodies, and lava lamps, all inventions of the human race. Using these observations, we can make the hypothesis that the Groks may have evolved from the humans that left Earth. After the Earth became uninhabitable, the humans who once lived there used technological advancements to leave the planet and colonize the perimeter of the center of the galaxy. These same advancements were also used on their own bodies, but came at the cost of their autonomy, creating the hive mind known as the Groks. The Grok spaceships can be encountered on the creature stage, millions of years before you can actually encounter a living Groks in the space stage. This gives them plenty of time to both evolve biologically and cybernetically, making the creatures we see today. Remnants of their past still exist within their collective consciousness, including a now evolved version of the English language and references to Star Trek and everyday human objects like lava lamps. Whether or not this was the intention of the developers, I would say this theory is a pretty solid one. However, it is just a theory. But wait, we still need to talk about Steve's connection to humans. This theory is a lot less in depth, but I would argue that it still has some ground to stand on. As pointed out by Nixland, Steve speaks in English. Yes, all the in-game text is in English or whatever language you have set in the options, but every other line of spoken dialogue is in an unintelligible language made up for SPORE. Tie that in with the fact that he also apparently has a timeshare on Earth, and maybe you can see how Steve is possibly the only Earthling left in the universe. Or who knows, maybe the Groks and Steve are both remnants of modern day humans in some way. Regardless, it's fun to speculate. Sean 1M. To end the corrections half, I'm actually not covering an entry itself. Instead, we're actually getting new information from an entry. Sean 1M was a SPORE creator who used to make content that isn't really appropriate for youngsters. Now there's no problem with that at all, because he kept it on his age-restricted DeviantArt and we don't kink shame on this channel. Heavy emphasis on that, do not go out of your way to harass him or anyone. Especially since Sean 1M was nice enough to not only comment on the last video, but also give some interesting info. According to Sean, there are more religions in SPORE than the few I mentioned in part 1. Different archetypes in Max's Made Galactic Adventures mention some other notable religions. Some examples include volcano goddesses and elder gods. It seems as if there are more than just those who follow Spode or the god who will come. Once again, thanks to Sean 1M. According to his comment, it seems as if he is focusing more on being a lore master than a creator, so I'm going to take his word. I also have to thank him for being a good sport about his mention in the last video. I tried to keep things unbiased, but I can understand now that folks won't like the attention. But with that, we are finished with this half of the SPORE Titanic. Let's move on to the new stuff. But not before a brief intermission. I hope you've been enjoying the video, and I appreciate that you took the time to get this far in. With all this yapping, I might need some help with the remaining segments, so let's welcome reoccurring guest Twuz, who's indeed a separate individual and not me putting on a voice like some people thought in the last video for some reason.
Hi, I'm Twuz. I'm happy to be here. I am not the same person as Royal Blue 13.
But yeah, she'll be helping me out every now and again throughout the rest of the video, so it's thanks to her that this isn't going to be delayed any further. Okay, let's get into the new stuff already. Developer heads. Let's begin with what was probably the most obvious entry to include onto a SPORE Iceberg that I left out. I guess I just thought it was so well known that there was no point in including it. but seeing comments from users like Juan Cruz Roviero and Sirai and a few others made me think I should this time around. On the planet select screen, if you rotate the galaxy quickly enough, the center of the galaxy will spew out several headshots of the developers of SPORE. A lesser known addition to this Easter egg is that if you hit Control and Shift while the first set of pictures are still on the screen, another set of headshots will also appear.
Cocoons. Cocoons are the strange pulsating sacs you sometimes see around other nests in the creature stage. When this happens, the species that owns the nest will become a more complex one after the process is completed. Basically, this is the non-playable creature's version of using the creature creator to upgrade themselves.
By the way, this entry comes from the user Alex Samuel. I just kind of forgot to tell her to read that part in the script. Creature stage game over bug. This is a well-known bug that occurs sometimes upon death in the creature stage, mentioned by the commentator Justin Spear. Basically what happens is that sometimes the game will get softlocked on a blacked out version of the death message screen for some reason. According to some forum posts I found online, the issue allegedly stems from a graphics card issue in the player's computer, so it's often recommended that you simply just lower the in-game graphics settings if this happens to you often. The thing is, I constantly get this bug no matter the settings when I play on a few computers I've had over the years, so I feel like it's just one of the many glitches our favorite buggy little game has. I just recommend saving very often during the creature stage to circumvent this bug. It only takes a few seconds, so just do so if you don't want to risk losing hours of progress like I have, because the game does not autosave. Other creatures in the tribal stage. What makes this entry interesting is that whether or not you've experienced it is purely by chance. I and the commentator who goes by the name Shenzi Swam seem to usually get nothing but our player-made species in the tribal stage. However, both of us seem to remember that not always being the case. After doing some research, it seems that this occurs because the tribal stage seems to prefer using the player's creations over others or maxuses. Basically what I'm saying is that depending on the player's luck, the tribal stage will either consist exclusively of the player creature, or whatever the Sporepedia spits out at you.
Black Cloud Hoppers. This is the first of many entries that were provided by the user named The Real Silver Gunner. Get used to hearing their username, because they caught on so many things that 13 missed. Black Cloud is one of the many consequence abilities the player can earn by completing a stage in a certain way. The Black Cloud is earned by those who get the friendly trait in the tribal stage and can be used to shut down all entertainment buildings within an enemy city. What's strange about this effect is that the cloud also drops creatures known as Tamaranian Hoppers, one of the earliest Maxis-made creatures, created by Will Wright, the head designer of SPORE himself.
ICBM Dr. Strangelove. This is the second entry from the Real Silver Gunner. The Intercontinental Ballistic Missile is the game-ending superpower of military nations in the civilization stage that is unlocked after the player captures 6 cities. Upon use, the player's capital fires several missiles towards all other uncaptured cities, instantly destroying them and forcing them to surrender. What's notable about the superpower is that it features a reference to the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove. As the missiles are fired, the game plays a whistle and a yee-haw sound effect, which is a direct reference to the end of the movie where the character Major Kong rides a nuclear bomb that is being dropped on a Soviet ICBM site. The Galactic Code. The Galactic Code is a diplomatic agreement that exists within the SPORE galaxy. Basically, it exists for the purpose of fairness between spacefaring empires and can be compared to the real-world Geneva Convention. And much like the rules of the Geneva Convention, they can be broken through the use of weapons of mass destruction. There are 3 weapons that can be used by the player to commit in-game war crimes. The gravitation wave that destroys all buildings and sapient life on a planet, the zealot colonizational tool known as fanatical frenzy that forces all inhabitants of a planet to convert to the user's religion, and the planet buster which just flats out obliterates the targeted world. Breaking the Galactic Code will cause the player's relationship with any nearby empires to plummet except for any nearby Grox planets, who will actually enjoy what you have done. That is, if it's not any of their planets being decimated. I have now mostly recovered from the illness that infected me between recording sessions, so let's jump right into the second group of new entries. Anticipaste. This is another entry from the Real Silver Gunner. Anticipaste is a Maxis-made creature that appears to be an omnivorous quadrupedal pair. What's notable about this creature is that it is the only Maxis-made creature that is asymmetrical. There was even a point where Anticipaste was the only asymmetrical creature to exist, as the asymmetry feature in SPORE's creators wasn't available to players until patch 1.05. The Adventure Town rocks. Adventure Town is the first galactic adventure level that the player is introduced to if they select Galactic Adventures on the main menu. One particular thing about this level is that there are 4 rocks on an island on this planet that cannot be deleted in the adventure editor. No one really knows why. This isn't the last time you'll see Adventure Town, but for now let's move on.
SPORE Islands. The next 2 entries were provided by the user GameZilla899. SPORE Islands was a Facebook-exclusive browser game that was meant to replicate some of the gameplay from the original Spore. From what we could gather from the Spore wiki, SPORE Islands focused on competing against other players for resources, except the player doesn't really control their creature at all. It seemed to be pretty automated, besides the extremely simple creature creator. The servers were only up between November 5th of 2009 and July 7th of 2010 due to a lack of funds to keep the game running.
SPORE Creatures Mobile. Yet another Spore spin-off I missed in the last video. Not to be confused with SPORE Creatures on the Nintendo DS, this SPORE Creatures was a spin-off developed for Apple devices that focused primarily on the creature stage like every other Spore spin-off for some reason. What's notable about this game is that it's a top-down 2D game like the Cell stage. Other than that, the game mechanics are basically just simpler versions of the original Spore's creature stage gameplay. It is unplayable today due to SPORE Creatures being a 32-bit app which is incompatible with iOS 11 or later. Clark and Stanley. Silver Gunner once again provides this entry. Clark and Stanley are the titular protagonists of a series of Maxis-made galactic adventures that essentially just involve them dying in comedic ways. Sort of like Kenny from South Park. The 3 official adventures made by Maxis Cimino are Clark and Stanley Go Camping, where they are run over by a truck, Clark and Stanley Go Stargazing, where they get crushed by a meteorite, and Clark and Stanley Go Swimming, where they are eaten alive by sharks. There have also been a ton of player-made Clark and Stanley levels that were inspired by the Maxis ones that basically follow the same premise.
Cube planets. Cube planets are a rare type of planet formation that players can encounter within the space stage that were added into the game after patch 1.02. As you can probably guess, they are planets that look a little cubic. They tend to have 6 circular oceans surrounded by thin connected corners of land. They were apparently added as a joke, but they're a pretty cool rare find.
Storybook Planets. Storybook planets are another rare category of planets that I was informed of by the username Searai. Storybook planets are notable due to their unconventional terrain that is based off of different objects. They come in 10 different types of formations. Crab legs, craters, dill pickles, gears and cogs, marshmallows, pastry, pineapple, tentacles 1 and 2, rattlesnake, and rock stack. Upon landing on a storybook planet, the player receives the Wonderland Wanderer badge. Masari statue. This is a Maxis-made prop used in various Maxis Galactic adventures. The most notable use of this model is in the previously mentioned Adventure Town, where it is claimed that this statue is a depiction of Steve. It doesn't really look anything like the Steve we see, so it is either a false depiction, or perhaps this is what we would find piloting the tiny little spaceship we find inside the center of the galaxy. We have reached our final stop on our journey. Let's finish strong with this last tier. Pirates are knights. Yet another topic provided by Silver Gunner. The wording of this one's probably a little confusing, so let me explain. Pirates are a group of spaceships that sometimes attack and pillage empires in the space stage. They have a unique ability to summon smaller versions of their ship that help with a raid called Summon Mini U. What's notable about this ability is that it is exclusive to the Knight philosophy, the only philosophy that cannot be randomly generated in the space stage. Only the player can become a knight by evolving with a specific set of traits at the end of each stage. Because of this, some have theorized that every empire in the universe that believes in the Knight philosophy become the pirates we sometimes encounter.
Battered Fish. Once again, from the real Silver Gunner. Battered Fish is a Maxis-made creature that can be encountered in the creature stage. What's notable about this creature is that it has an uncanny resemblance to the sea monster that eats the player if they swim too far out into large bodies of water. There probably aren't any in-game lore reasons for their similarities, but it can be assumed that Battered Fish was heavily based off the sea monster, or vice versa.
The Wanderer and the Species Shuffler. The final real Silver Gunner entry. The Wanderer is one of the 10 archetypes that players can become at the start of the space stage. What's notable about the Wanderer in specific though is that it can only be obtained by skipping the first 4 stages of the game by selecting the space stage at the beginning of a new world. Unlike other philosophies, the Wanderer does not have a unique power. However, there exists code within the game for a tool for Wanderers known as the Species Shuffler. It seems that it would have swapped out every species on the targeted planet with others. It's unknown why it was scrapped, especially because it seems as if it was basically finished considering it's still in the game's code. But some theorize that the developers wouldn't want to reward the player with a somewhat overpowered ability for skipping stages. Or perhaps the developers wouldn't want to have an ability locked behind a second playthrough, considering the fact you can only start a game at the space stage after reaching it in a previous game.
Mega builds. This topic comes from the user Cube67. Mega builds refers to creations that use an excessive amount of parts to create highly detailed works. Some of these creations get so complex they barely look like they even belong in SPORE to begin with. To those of you who watched part 1, everything made by the infamous UBD clan were mega builds. You can make your own mega builds without modding the game by using cheat codes. Simply hit Ctrl plus Shift plus C to open the cheat text box and type the word freedom, and boom, you've got a larger complexity meter. Just be aware you can't use any of your massive creations in the actual game.
Fiction universe. This is a term used to refer to a fan-made massive sci-fi universe as brought to my attention by the commenter FireMaker125. I genuinely don't know where to begin with this one because there are literally thousands of creations created by thousands of users to add some lore and excitement to the almost 15-year-old game. If you're interested, I recommend doing your own research. Just let it be known that I find it really cool that there are so many people who are still so devoted to this game. They truly deserve SPORE 2 if casual players like me don't. Roblox and SPORE. This entry is probably my favorite out of all the ones in this video. I was stunned seeing this the first time, it's just so interesting to me. For some odd reason, there was a time where if you were to view a creature in SPORE and proceeded to open Roblox, you would see a massive silhouette of the SPORE creature instead of the bottom skybox. This glitch has been long patched out, so it doesn't work anymore. But the thing is, no one knows whether it was an update to SPORE or an update to Roblox that fixed the issue. The user JPOG7TV left a comment linking me to this old video from 2009 demonstrating this glitch in all its glory. So thanks. But before we move on to the next topic, what if I told you that this glitch may have also worked in reverse? I cannot find the original commenter who sent me this video, so I'm so sorry that I cannot properly credit you. Comment again if you see this somehow, and please don't lie if you didn't. Anyways, I was linked to a video that seems to show the models from Roblox replacing the models for creatures in SPORE. So I guess this weird coding exploit must have worked both ways. Creature vinyl figure. This entry was provided by their user Joe Vela. At some point in the past, you could purchase a vinyl figure of one of your created creatures from the official SPORE website. While researching, I couldn't find much about it online at first, so I thought it could have just been a rumor. But eventually I found an article from 2008 that includes a picture of a vinyl figure of a SPORE creature as well as instructions on how you could get your own back in the day. If anyone out there watching has one, please DM me on Twitter or something so I can not only hear about your experience obtaining it, but also I want you to send me pics of the statue. The Sporums. The Sporums are something that I've mentioned several times throughout this video and the first. These were the forums on SPORE's official website that the original SPORE community would discuss every minute aspect of this amazing game. In July 2018, a moderator named MaxiBazJT announced that the Sporum would be relocated to EA Answers HQ, and then made it into a read-only site later that August. According to the SPORE wiki, there were over 79,424 topics, 4,888,801 messages, and 1,022 registered users on the site when the posting was disabled on August 15, 2018. It would be in April 2019 that the entire site was closed down. Much like the Library of Alexandria, we have sadly lost all of the information from the ancient SPORE players. Everything from drama to theories to friendly banter are all gone. Where do you think those posters are today? It's been almost a decade and a half. If a day one SPORE player had a kid back then, they'd be in high school by now. Everything that they contribute to the forums is gone. Goes to show the importance of internet archiving. You never know when the entire history of a fandom will be deleted. Before we close off this chapter of the SPORE Iceberg, there are a few entries that were submitted in the comments that I found little to no information about. So once again, I'm going to ask all of you in the audience for help. If anyone out there knows something about the following entries, leave a comment. Although the real Silver Gunner had provided a lot of cool new entries, there are two that had me stumped, being Grob and Harvester Vehicles. User What the Folk had made the claim that empires could spawn on suns. This one seems pretty self-explanatory, but I couldn't find anything online proving that this could happen. Commenter Cube67 mentioned being surprised that I've left out the hidden vehicle weapon from the last video, and unfortunately I had to leave it out of this one too, since I have no idea what this means. And lastly, a user with the name Anna Silver left a comment describing something called the cocoon virus, but once again nothing came up in my research. So yeah, those were the 5 topics that were submitted that I was interested enough to look into, but failed to find anything. If the original commenters or anyone watching this now can elaborate, please do. But enough about that, let's finally finish this long voyage. And with that, the SPORE Iceberg Explained Part 2 is finally complete. Even if the main video is basically over now, I recommend you watch the very end for info regarding the future of this channel and my thoughts on the SPORE Iceberg videos, and whether or not I'll make a part 3. First, I'd like to once again thank everyone for the continued support and patience. I realize that it can be a little frustrating waiting for a video I promised oh so long ago. I hope to be able to work on videos more in the future, but I will ask for some understanding in return. I'm a college student with a ton of other obligations in real life that will always have to come before any content creation. If I was at the point where I could support myself solely from whatever revenue I could get from making videos, then I would do so in a heartbeat. That is literally a dream job for most people. But for the time being, uploads will continue to be somewhat sporadic. We're working on a ton of ideas though, for more scripted videos like this as well as other things, so please look forward to all of that. Now in regard to making a part 3 to the SPORE Iceberg, I don't know if I can necessarily promise that for multiple reasons. Firstly, besides those 5 loose ends from the last segment, I don't know what else I could talk about. I could maybe make a definitive version of the iceberg by compiling the 2 videos with some bonus entries relating to the remaining unanswered questions, but that's about it. But the more important reason why I might not want to do an actual part 3 is because I don't really want to be the SPORE Iceberg guy, you know? I love SPORE and I loved making these videos, but it's not what I want to make for the rest of my days. If you like the SPORE videos, then that's great and I really appreciate that. I literally cannot thank everyone enough. That video is almost at 500,000 views at the time I record this, but I recommend checking out some of my other stuff. But basically what I'm trying to say is, if you like the iceberg videos, I plan on making videos that can be somewhat compared to them. They most likely won't be iceberg videos or SPORE videos, but they will be similar discussions of some of my favorite pieces of media. Speaking of which, let's go more in depth in regard to the future of the channel. Without going to specifics as the projects I have in mind are still early in development, I want to focus on more long-form videos similar to this one. For example, I have an idea for a multi-hour long series about one of my favorite childhood TV shows, but that wouldn't be out or even in production for several months. I also want to announce the creation of a second channel known as RB14. I plan on migrating some videos from this channel to RB14 that don't necessarily fit in with the rest if I haven't already. Along with that, clips, behind the scenes videos, and so much more will eventually be on there too, so please check it out in the card above or the description below. To close things out, I want to thank the users of the SPORE Wiki for providing a large majority of the information needed to make this video. Without their hard work, this video would have taken even longer to produce. This also extends to all the comments from the last video too, so thanks again. I also want to once again thank Twaz for guest starring in this video. Her help on and off the channel really means a lot. And lastly, I want to thank you for watching all the way through. You truly deserve a special thanks for getting this far into the word vomit. But yeah, let's finally conclude this chapter of the SPORE Iceberg. If you haven't already, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Until next time, everyone.